5 plus 2 equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
우와, 리지야, you're so smart.
안녕하세요, 지호맘입니다. 제가 요즘에 지호에게 낙타유를 먹이고 있어가지고 이 낙타유에 대한 자료를 막 뒤지다가 굉장히 괜찮은 비디오 하나를 발견을 했어요. 이제 이분은 ABA 쪽 전문가신데 ABA를 굳이 생각을 하지 않더라도 이제 이분이 40년간 이 자폐 필드에 있으면서, 자폐뿐만이 아니겠죠, 이제 발달 장애 필드에 있으면서 이분의 경험을, 그리고 이제 자폐에 대한 개인적인 생각들을 이렇게 말해 놓은 비디오가 있어서 제가 공유를 하게 됐습니다. 이 비디오에 나오시는 박사님, 그 닥터 도린이라는 박사님의 말을 저는 말 토시 하나 안 빼고 다 동의를 해요. 많은 완치된 사례들을 직접 보셨고 또 그 아이들을 가르치셨고 이분의 지식이, 이제 오티즘에 대한 지식이 시대와 함께 업데이트가 되셨어요. 그래서 이분이 사실 1987년 오티즘 그 프로젝트에 참여하신 어떤 그 박사님 분 중에 한 분이세요. 그런데 이제 아이들을 40년간 치료를 하면서 제가 지호를 통해서 느끼고 있었던 그 자폐아들 특유의 어떤 생리적인 문제점들, 이거를 이분은 인정을 하시고 여기에 대해서 언급을 하세요. 사실 주류의학이나 특히 제가 지호에게 이제 교육의 한 방법으로 많이 사용하는 그 ABA 전문가 분들은 제가 지호에게 식단을 한다고 하거나 이제 영양요법을 한다고 하면 그게 과학적으로 그렇게 증명이 되지 않은 일이다. 괜히 그런데 힘쓰지 말라. 뭐 멀트 치료만 해도 그건 아직까지 그 FDA에서 승인도 받지 않았고, 이런 식으로 이제 생리학 쪽에 대해서 반대 의견을 가지신 분들이 굉장히 많아요. 근데 이분은 이제 그 ABA의 어떤 그 앞머리에 서서 리더 역할을 하시면서도 그 우리 자폐 아이들이 갖는 소화기관 쪽의 문제, 또 그 생리학적 문제들을 꿰뚫어 보시더라고요. 어쨌든 이 비디오는 새로운 오티즘에 대한, 그 오티즘을 치료하는 그 주류 치료법, 치료라고도 하죠, 교육이라도 하고, 그 ABA의 선두주자에 계신 박사님이시기 때문에 보시면서 느끼거나 배우시는 점들이 저처럼 있을 거라고 생각해요. 그래서 조금 긴 비디오이고 제가 또 원본을 그대로 따와서 또 번역을 한 또 그런 비디오예요. 제가 봤더니 그런 거 되게 많이 하더라고요, 제가. 그래서 보시면서 저처럼 뭔가 느낌, 이렇게 가슴에 딱 와닿는 이런 느낌을 저처럼 느끼시는 분이 계실까봐 제가 비디오를 번역을 했습니다. 시청하시면서 좋은 영향을 받으셨으면 좋겠어요.
Use the R word, the recovery word. And we have people who have questions and feelings and emotions that come with this, and people are saying, what do you mean? Somebody's just flat out, you don't recover from autism. I'm trying to, Augusta George is watching too. So somebody said, you don't recover from autism. You can learn to help them live and work with it. And somebody else said, well, I just started watching when she said that 2 kids recovered, so I want to know what she meant. But I would agree with you with not recovering, but I just want to learn more about it and about helping your child. we know that words have so much meaning for people, that we attach meaning to words, and sometimes when people use the word recovery, people have emotions. So let's define what you mean by it. But I want to first ask everybody, I had to.
Right. So, and I have to say, Shannon, it also evokes a lot of emotion in me.
I bet.
Because my entire life has been dedicated to this field.
Yeah.
So let me just, you know, I try very hard to not get defensive as well. So I'll do my best. If you are a parent and you do not believe that an individual with autism has, not every individual, but that some individuals with autism have the ability to become absolutely 100% recovered, and I mean that. In other words, they have nothing different than any other child or an adult or individual, then I have issue with that. And I want to talk about that. Yeah. Because if you haven't seen it, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Now, that you go, and I will define it. I'm happy to define it, and I will talk about it for as long as you guys want. But please don't imply that my entire life and the life of thousands of individuals who have worked in this field has been useless. If we didn't recover kids, there wouldn't be insurance funding for this right now. Let's just start there. Yeah. This is no joke, and it's not a matter of my opinion either. Back in the 70s and 80s, when we used to do therapy, recovery was published in 1987. The first article that published recovery was a study that came out of UCLA, where I was on that project. And basically what it was, and this was published in 1987, the studies showed that we had 3 groups of children. The first group received 40 hours of one-to-one ABA therapy from us at UCLA in the project that was called the Autism Project. The second group received 10 hours of the same therapy from us again. The reason they received 10 hours was because they lived too far away from UCLA and we could not access them on a regular basis. They were very far. They were like an hour drive. And our therapists at UCLA couldn't go out there that often. Okay, so they received 10 hours a week. And then there was a third group which received 10 hours a week of a different type of therapy from the other side of UCLA. And that was sort of a different, kind of an eclectic approach. After 2.5 years, the result was that 47%, half of the kids in our intensive group had recovered, as opposed to 2% in the other 2 groups who received 10 hours of therapy. Now, what is recovered back then? How did we define it? The way we defined it, it was 3 different criteria. One was that there was a normal IQ. So these individuals were tested on intelligence tests. We tested them before beginning intervention and then after 2.5 years to 3 years of intervention. And their IQ was normal. Normal means it was around 100 points. What else did we do? We also placed them in regular education first grade, and they were there in regular ed without any assistance. And this is, we're talking back in the 80s, okay? So that was the second criteria. The third criteria was an independent psychiatrist would remove the individuals, like would see the individual and say, no, this person doesn't classify for autism. Okay, that is how we defined it back then. Now, how do we define it now? Like, so many years have gone by and we've learned a lot more about autism, and we've seen different gradients of autism too, by the way. So the way that I define it and the way that we have now published, these are all standardized measures, by the way. These are not measures that we've just made up and said, oh, they work for us. This is how any child would be tested. So the adaptive measure looks at things like daily living, socialization, communication, etc. And all of these children get to the level of normal. Normal, which means they are indistinguishable from their peers. Indistinguishable from peers. That's a very important term. So now when we call someone recovered, we look at IQ, adaptive functioning, social functioning, and language functioning. Those 4 things, as well as I even go above and beyond, and I test my kids on executive functioning and pragmatic language. We give a series of tests at the very, very end where we look at every area, and we want to make sure that the kids are really, really doing well in school, they have friends, they're doing fine. So yes, there are those individuals who still have signs and symptoms of autism. Those are not the individuals that we are classifying as recovered fully. Yes, there are individuals who will even lose their diagnosis. They no longer fit the criteria for ASD. You could say, for all practical purposes, those individuals are recovered because they no longer classify for a diagnosis. If they went and saw a doctor today, the doctor would not give them the diagnosis of autism. So for all practical purposes, those individuals are recovered. But at CARD, for research purposes, we go above that. We go above that criteria. And we do a ton of testing to prove that this individual fits right in the middle of peers, or in many cases, higher than their peers, because a lot of our kids have incredible memory and unbelievable skills. They don't lose those skills. They're just gaining, learning other things they need so that they can function in normal society. Many of these individuals not only go on to school, but they go to college. I have been around in the field long enough where I have individuals who've been married. I'm waiting for my first married couple to actually have children so we can see how that goes. But what I'm saying is that it is absolutely possible for individuals to do extremely well. Now, not every individual, and we don't know why. To be honest with you, we will start with, and the younger the child is, as Shannon said, the more hours they get. We've also shown these things. It's a matter, this is how I see autism, and can I keep ranting?
You can.
I remember testifying in court for a family here in California, and the judge, this is where I've come from, and this is why I get so upset with people doubting the fact that there's a lot of potential for people on the spectrum to recover. And I want to talk about that because there's nothing wrong with having ASD other than the fact that it makes it harder for you to integrate and benefit from what society has to offer. Everything makes it more easy if you are able to integrate in society, if you're able to benefit from normal education, if you're benefiting from having friends. All of those things, I think personally, are beneficial to you. So why not allow us to teach the individual as much as we possibly can? How does autism, to me, this is how autism is. So first of all, to begin with, I mean, I formed my own theories of where autism comes from. But from my perspective, autism is a diagnosis that has to do with the inability to detoxify fast enough from all these environmental toxins that we experience. These affect the child's developing brain in different ways. Some children will have very severe effects based on the developmental period. Let's say the child is very, very early on and they're not able, they have high toxicity due to exposure to various things, which we can't even measure. There's no way we can measure all the toxicity in our environment. There's too many types of toxicity, and we also don't know the genetic composition that leads to this low redox. So it's a combination of being unable to detoxify and being exposed to all these toxins, leading to the differences in how we learn. You know, I was just reading again last night another study that came out on sensory sensitivities. To me, this is really about the sensory input, because if you look at a child, a young child, how do they learn? They learn by the things they see and hear and sense and so on. This is how we all learn, right? There's so much we have not yet learned, and we're beginning to now learn about how individuals with autism see things. I mean, Temple Grandin tells us this from years and years ago when she was a child, that she used to see things in individual boxes, right? We now know through studies that individuals with autism actually, when they see a scene, they're seeing certain things that we're not seeing, and they're not seeing other things that we're seeing.
Right.
And you know what? I guarantee you there's differences amongst us similarly. We just don't know it.
Yeah.
Because we are within the similar realm. So if I look at something like right now, I'm looking in that direction, of course the first thing I see is the camera. But at the same time, without even diverting my eyes, I see you, Shannon, I see the screen, I see all the things in the room. Individuals with autism don't have those same exact capabilities. They see other things. Like when they're looking at the camera, they'll see the logo on the bottom of the camera where I wouldn't necessarily. And so because of the fact that they perceive things sensory through their senses differently, because of how their brain was developing early on, they learn differently. It is just as simple as that. They learn differently. Andy said this to me, one of my recovered kids. He said to me, I used to hear background noises like the door screeching much more prevalent than the sounds of language. If that's the case, you're never going to learn language. You are going, because language is a background noise. Yeah. You're going to learn to block language. So their sensory input is different. If we're receiving information visually and auditorily in different ways, we're not going to learn the same way. What does ABA do? ABA adjusts that. That's all it does. ABA sits with the child and allows the child to learn through different modalities. It gives the child the ability to pay attention now to all the different things in the room instead of the logo. It gives the child practice at a very early age to listen to the sound of language as opposed to those background sounds. So ABA corrects or redirects the learning of the child and intensifies it, because a lot of our children, you start at 3, I'm happy. If you start at 2, I'm even happier, because the child's learning has gone awry. The child is learning things like that little logo, like that background noise, and the sooner I get them, the more I can teach them. Yeah. Now, if I have a 3-year-old, I have 2 years, 3 years where I can teach the child everything they need to reach the normal functioning of a 5 or 6-year-old. I will do my best to do that. And that involves lots and lots and lots of hours of therapy, but it also involves the parent making sure the child is sleeping, making sure the child is not eating anything they're allergic to, making sure the child doesn't have massive gastrointestinal issues and pain. Because the more comfortable the child is, the more ready they are for learning, the more they're sleeping, the more healthy they are, the more they will take in. And the more they take in, if we all work as a team, the individual is taking in all this stuff. There's no question in my mind that individuals with autism can learn. That's the key to it. How much can they learn? It just has to do with how much practice. If someone comes, as kids, our kids are amazing. Sometimes I'll see children who are like 5 years old, and they're still the sweetest human being ever. They have no aggression, yet they can't communicate at all. And I think to myself, oh my dear Lord, how is this little guy not getting aggressive? How is this guy not getting ticked off because no one understands him? And I always tell the parents, it's because of you. The parent has been amazing as figuring out what his needs are. And you know what? You need to stop when they're babies, right? We have to figure out with our babies why they're crying. Is it a cry because they need a diaper change, or they're hungry, or they're angry or hurt, right? What's going on? Yeah. So we figure that out. With kids with autism, we never stop that. Yeah. And with normal kid, typically developing kids, at some point we're like, you're 2 years old, you need to use your words, and we don't do that with our kids. The reason I get so passionate about this subject of recovery is that personally I feel that if I don't set a high enough bar, I am not doing what I'm meant to be doing. I am accepting less than the child that I'm working with can produce. And then I'll be no different from everyone else who's just babysitting. And that's not what my world is about, nor is it what anyone at CARD is supposed to be doing, because our goal is not to maintain the kids where they are. Our goal is to teach them. And whether we can teach them one new subject or content or 1,000, we have to push. We have to push higher and higher, because otherwise we're just accepting, and the child will not go beyond the limit we set for them. As far as I'm concerned, individuals with autism have no limits. There is no upper limit. I want to push them for the rest of their lives to be happy, to do the best they can. And it's not really about recovery or not recovery. It's just about that limit. It's about never expecting the child to do anything less than I would expect anyone else to do. For our viewers, please go on Amazon and order Recovered Journeys Through Autism. I made that film because it was for parents who went through this exactly the thing that you guys are going through. These are parents who were at very high level university settings getting their kids diagnosed and were told, put your child in special ed, just save your money, you're gonna need it later on. Your child's never gonna recover. This is not something that you recover from, all that sort of stuff. And this is, we're talking, you guys, back, 90s, early 90s. And they didn't believe it, and they put all their efforts into it. And you will see these children when they started, and you will see these children at age 13, whatever, 11, 17, when they're done. And I wish, I don't have time right now, but one of my dreams is to do a follow-up on those kids, because, the child who on there is, to me, looks the most severe is, I can't even tell you what he's doing right now in the world, because it's so high level. And he's, all four of those kids are doing incredibly well in their worlds. They are one of them is lecturing across the world about various things. They are more than recovered.
Not about...
Suggest something. If you're wanting for these children more than other people are wanting, I think they have it to give, and they have it to be much more than the limitations that society and the medical community puts upon them. I mean, if Ron can function in a superior mentality, whereas 7 months ago he looked retarded and autistic and brain damaged and hopeless, then if that's possible for him, it's possible for any child, whether they're autistic, whether they have learning disabilities, whether they have emotional problems. If you stay in touch with what you're wanting, maybe you could facilitate it for every child.
Without having any expectations.